Express is a framework, some say a middleware engine. It doesn't matter, it's both. Express is built to help you build a routing structure for your web apps. All of those HTTP requests, get, post, delete, put, what we call CRUDs, create, read, update, delete. Express lets you build a system on the back end that directs incoming traffic from your front end to specific locations in the back end that match these HTTP requests. And so what are these locations? What do they do? Well, these locations, what we call routes, when triggered, they send some sort of response to your front end. This is the request-response nature of web development. And so what are these responses then? Well, these responses are a lot of things. They could be whole web pages, HTML, they could be JSON data from a database, simple string messages, images, anything you can think of. You can respond or send back to the front end. So think of Express as a middleman between your front end and any sort of data in the back end. All right, so to get Express up and running, we need to install Nodejs because we need NPM. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a link in the description below to a video I did on that. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a link or a card on the top right. And so let's start with creating a file for our server. We're going to name it server.js. You can name it whatever you want, main, script, whatever. I'm going to call mine server.js, and then we're going to install Express with NPM. So NPM, navigate to the directory of your server.js, obviously. So NPM. Now there are 4 different steps to setting up an Express server. One of them is optional, but as a full stack developer, you want to have as much control as possible. So for me, it's not an option. And so the first step is we initialize the Express package. The second step was we build a basic landing page or home page landing route. The third step, which is optional, but not really optional for me, is you build a custom error handler. And then the fourth step is, of course, starting the server. And so the first step is importing the package. So we're going to say const express. This is just the variable name. It can be that if you want. I'm just going to name mine express. And we're going to require the package we just installed with npm. Now we have to initialize Express. So we're going to say const app is equal to express with the parentheses. This initializes the Express package. This app can be called router. Sometimes I call it router. You can say main. Again, you can do like that if you want. I call mine app for the main routes here. And so that's the first step. The second step is we have to build a landing page, a landing route. And so we say app.get. This get is an HTTP request. We have things like post. We have things like delete, put. The default landing page is going to be a get. And there are 2 parameters or 2 arguments here. The first is the URI, or what the user has to type in on their URL, their address bar, in order to get this or trigger this route. So we're just going to say slash like that. And so when they go to, let's say, whatever it's going to be, https:// blah, 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 .com, that's this route here. For us, it's going to be something like localhost port 3000 /, and that's going to trigger this guy right here. So the first argument is the URI, the address. This could be this, and if that was that, then we'd have localhost : or :3000 / fjsdklf, and that would trigger this route. But again, we're just making a basic landing page home route, so it's just the slash. The second argument, we get a request and a response, and it's a callback, and these guys are objects. This request is the request from the front end. If you don't know what that means, I'll have a link in the description or a card in the top right about request objects from the front end. So we get the request from the front end, and then we get the response object, which we use to respond back to the front end guys. Now there are multiple ways to send, or multiple send types, response types. We can do basic strings like hello world, like this. Hello world. We can do HTML like this. H1 hello world /H1. We can do, let's put a closing chevron there. We can do JSON. So we have like objects. And let me just do that. The message would be, again, hello world. We can send back files. So send file. The first parameter would be the path to the file, .jpeg. And the second parameter would be the error callback in case it didn't send. We're not going to do that for this video, just basic text or data. So we have these 3 types. We're going to comment these guys out. I'll show you them one by one. So that's the second step. We've built a basic landing route. The third step, which is optional but not really, is to build a custom error handler. So when you throw errors in any part of your routes in your programs, this is what catches it. Now you have to code this exactly as it is, or Express won't know it's your custom. You're overriding its custom error handler functionality. So you need to use app.use, and then there's no slash or URI here. It's just straight into a callback function. In that callback function signature, you have to have error. So four objects or parameters here: error, the request, which is the same as the request up here, the response, which is the same as the response up here, and then you need the next. If you only have error, request, res, and not next, this will not function properly. You need the next here. So again, that's a callback. And to write my custom error handlers, just for this video, we're just going to say within the error object that you get passed, there's something called status. And we'll get to status in a second. And there's something called the message. So whenever you throw an error in any part of your program, and it gets filtered down to this, and if you threw the error with a message, that message would be contained in error.message. So we're just going to send that back to the user. Res.send error.message, just like that. And I'll explain next in a moment. It's not confusing, but it's difficult to explain without going into a whole diatribe of what it is. And so that's the third step. We've created a custom error handler. Let me just comment these guys. So let's say Initialize Express. That's step 1. Step 2 is, let's say, a default landing route. Step 3 is our custom error handler. And then we're going to move on to actually creating the server. So let's create the server, and then we're going to start the server. So creating the server, we get to dictate which port it's on. So best practices is you extrapolate that into a constant variable or an environment variable. We'll just say it's a constant. So we're going to run our guy on port 3000, just like that. Now to create the server, we use app.listen. I usually put this in a separate variable in case you want to do something with the server. So const server is equal to app.listen. And there are two parameters, the port, but instead of using the port like that, we're going to set the port to the Express app. So we're just going to say app.set the property port, if I can type port, to the constant. So now wherever you use app in your program, it'll know what the port is. And so in order to get that, we say app.get the property port. So we've specified the port for our server, and now we're going to get the callback. And so once the server's up and running, I'm just going to console.log server is up and running on port and plus app.get port, like that. Three closings. All right. So that's it. We've initialized Express. We have a default landing route, which I'll show you guys what we can send and what it looks like on the front end. We have our custom error handler route, and then we've created the server. Let's start the server. So save that, go back into your console, and we start it with node. So we're just running the JavaScript file, essentially. Node server.js, and we get our message, which is server up and running on port 3000. So we navigate to our Chrome. We'll use Chrome for this. And then we can navigate to localhost default landing route, which is /. We don't really need to do that. And we get hello world, which is sent as a string. Let me increase the size of this. So we have hello world sent as a string. That was this guy right here. Sent as a string. Now let's send some HTML. So I'll comment this out, and I'll comment this back in. Save. Now when I saved, watch what happens. I saved the file, I modified the file, saved it, and I refresh the page, and we don't get the HTML. This is because we have to restart the server. So we Control-C here, node server.js, server's up and running. We go back to our web page, refresh, and we get the H1 hello world. Just to prove it's HTML, let's do the inspect, and you'll see the H1 hello world right here. Can we increase the size of that? Yes, we can. H1 hello world. Now this whole process of starting and stopping just because you saved something, we can streamline that by using something called nodemon. So let's close the server. Let's comment this guy out, and we're going to see some JSON. So comment that guy back in. Instead of typing node, we can say nodemon. So whenever we make a change in our file, and we save it, it will automatically refresh the server. So we say nodemon server.js.
God damn it!
So we've just sent data from the back end to the front end based on what route the front end is triggering. And that's only one half of the equation. How do we get information from the front end once they trigger a route? So I'm going to show you two ways, the get and the post. And so as you probably know, when you're on the front end and you send a get request to the back end, you send your data in key value pairs in the URL, something like this. Question mark indicates we're about to write a query string. The name is the key, and we equal the value. We'll say Rex. So all we're going to do is we're going to send a get request with this data. This name is equal to Rex to the backend, and the backend is just going to print it out with hello Rex instead of hello world. So how do we capture this guy in the back end? So let's go to our script, our server, and so it's sent in something called, we'll put it in a name variable, something called rec.query, and then the name of the variable like that. So let's modify our hello world send. So we're going to say hello plus name plus, and then close off the H1 like that. And now we save. We go back to our page, we hit enter, and we get hello Rex. And as you know, we can have multiple key value pairs. So let's say city is equal to NYC. We can go to the back end and we can code for that as well. So let's say instead of name, we're going to have city rec.query.city and replace that with city, save, nodemon automatically refreshes, we hit enter, and we get NYC. And that's how you use or capture get data from the front end. Now, how do we do this with post? Let's go back to our script, our server. So let's create that route. So instead of app.get, we're going to do app.post. And the route we're just going to say is gimme data. And we get the request object, we get the response object, and we're just going to do the exact same thing, which is send their data right back to them. And so we get this not in the query of the request object, but the body of the request object. So const name is equal to rec.body.name. Change that to name. We save. Now to test this, I'm going to use a program called Postman. I'll have a link in the description. All it does is it lets you make HTTP requests to backends, but you can actually put data in the body, do more complicated forms of testing. And so we'll say localhost, and it's going to be the gimme data. It's going to be a post request like that, and we're going to send raw JSON like this. And we're just going to send the same thing. So name, and the name's going to be Rex like that. Now when we send, we get this response. Cannot read property name of undefined. What's going on? Well, this brings us to what Express can do, or what Express is kind of, what some people say it is, which is like a middleware engine. So right now we're getting the rec.body, but it's not being parsed. This information is not being parsed. So we could parse it ourselves, or we can just install middleware to do it for us. So that's what we're going to do. So we go back to our console. We're going to install something called body parser like this. And so this is going to parse all incoming body data for us, and it just gives us the meat of the stuff we actually want. And so we're going to go back up here. We're going to import that package. So const, I'll call it body p is equal to require. Body parser just like that. Now we have to initialize it in Express. Make the middleware machine use it. And so we'll say app.use body p dot, and I think the method was called JSON like that. So it's going to parse all incoming JSON data from the body for us. And so now this should work. Name is equal to rec.body.name, and print out hello Rex. So we go back to our Postman. We have the URL with the URI gimme data. We have the request type, which is a post, and we have the data we're sending in, which is name Rex. We hit send, and we get hello Rex back. Now this is just raw data here. We can say preview, so we can see what it would look like with HTML actually executed, but we're just going to keep it on pretty right there. So that's how you use a piece of middleware to parse data coming in, the body of the request object, and how you don't need a piece of middleware to pick apart the data coming in the URL of the request object. So before I let you go, let me explain next very quickly. It's a bit difficult to explain, but I'll try my best. And so next allows you to skip the route you're on and go to the next matched route. And so let's say we had in our program something like app.get, and the route was /user/ and then they entered some sort of ID. And then we had another route that was also app.get and also /user, but just /user. If in this route we called next, so request response next, like this, or we also need the next object. I'm not actually going to call it, but here we go. We called next in this based on some sort of logic in this route here. We would skip all of the code after the next in this block. So anything under here we'd skip, and we go to the next matching route, which is /user. So we trickle down from user. Basically, we simplify. So we go from complicated to simplified. So user, and this FJDK, which is two URIs, and we filter down to just /user, and then we filter down to just //. And so based on how our routes work, when we call next in this guy, and I've added next here, what it's going to do, it's going to skip all of this code here, and it's going to go to the next matching route. Now the next matching route is not app.post, because post route is not a get route. The next matching route is this guy, our default error handler. And so what we can do with next is we can send errors. But before we do that, let me just show you this. Console.log, and then we're just going to say, not even console.log, excuse me, res.send, let's say error handler, like that. We go to our page, we hit F5, and because we're on the default or the landing page, but we hit the next, or we called next, we get redirected to the error handler route. Now, what you can do with the next is you can throw errors with it. This is how you make and use a custom error handler. So just say throw new error, and we'll just say blah, 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 like that. Like that. And our error handler is set up to take the message in that error and display it to the user. So we go back here, we hit F5, and we get the blah, blah, blah. So that's very quickly what next is used for. It gets a bit complicated, but as you use Express, you'll understand and have a more intuitive understanding of how next, where to call next, why to call next, all that stuff. So that's going to be it for this video. It was a long one. I don't like doing these videos too long like this, but it had to be done. Don't forget to give a like, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
And a good day to you, sir!